500 years before the birth of Jesus, a God-realized being named Lao Tzu in ancient China dictated 81 verses, which are regarded by many as the ultimate commentary on the nature of our existence. This classic text of these verses, called the Tao Te Ching, or the Great Way, offers advice and guidance that is balanced, moral, spiritual, and always concerned with working for the good. I have reviewed hundreds of translations of the Tao Te Ching. In this book, I have written 81 distinct essays on how to apply the ancient wisdom of Lao Tzu to today's modern world. This work contains all 81 verses of the Tao, compiled from my researching of 10 of the most well-respected translations of this text, which has survived for more than 25 centuries. Each of the 81 chapters is designed for actually living the Tao, or the Great Way, today, and concludes with a section called Do the Tao Now. I spent an entire year reading, researching, and meditating on Lao Tzu's messages, practicing them each day, and ultimately writing down these insights as I felt Lao Tzu wanted you to know them. This is a work to be read slowly, one verse a day. As I say, this is a book that will forever change the way you look at your life. And the result will be that you'll live in a new world aligned with nature. Writing this book changed me forever. I now live in accord with the natural world and feel the greatest sense of peace I've ever experienced. I'm so proud to present this interpretation of the Tao Te Ching and offer you the same opportunity for change that it has brought to me. Change your thoughts. Change your life. Living the wisdom of the Tao Te Ching. Preface. Progress is important without change, and those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything. George Bernard Shaw. Change your thoughts, change your life is the end product of my year-long journey of research, contemplation, and application of the Tao Te Ching, a book of wisdom that's been translated more than any volume in the world, with the exception of the Bible. Many scholars consider this Chinese classic the ultimate discourse on the nature of existence, and it continues to be a valuable resource for achieving a way of life that guarantees integrity, joy, peace, and balance. I recently read about someone who overcame life-threatening addictive behaviors by reading and rereading the 81 verses of this ancient text. Just imagine, in fewer than 100 short pages, it describes a way of living that's balanced, moral, and spiritual, and that works for all facets of life on earth. Legend tells us that the Tao Te Ching was authored by Lao Tzu, a prophet who was also the keeper of the imperial archives in the ancient capital of Luoyang. Seeing the continual decay during a period of warring states, Lao Tzu decided to ride westward into the desert. At what is called the Hangku Pass, a gatekeeper named Yin Si, knowing of Lao Tzu's reputation for being a man of wisdom, begged him to record the essence of his teachings. Thus, the Tao Te Ching was born out of 5,000 Chinese characters. In all of my reading on the origins of the Tao Te Ching, I never found a definitive historical record of its writing. Yet today, it survives in thousands of versions in virtually every language. In fact, after reading this classic text one morning and then taking in a different interpretation that same afternoon, I was hooked. I ordered more translations, 5 of which were quite old and 5 of which were more modern. Since neither Lao Tzu nor the origins of his verses are historically certain, I was fascinated by the different ways the 5,000 characters were interpreted by scholars in the editions that I studied, especially when you consider that many of these ancient Chinese symbols are no longer in use and invite differing translations themselves. I then felt called upon to write an essay for each verse that showed its valuable wisdom applied to the 21st century. From those 10 translations I'd gone over, I pieced together the 81 passages in Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, based on how they resonated with me. This book is my personal interpretation of the Tao Te Ching, each verse of which gave me an insight into life and nature. As you read on, know that these pages were pasted together from what I personally felt were the most useful aspects of those 10 different translations I studied, and I apologize for any exclusions or if the inclusions don't seem to be a perfect fit. One of the many gifts of the Tao Te Ching is its mind-stretching quality, especially in the way that Lao Tzu uses irony and paradox to get you to look at life. If you think that being forceful is the appropriate response, Lao Tzu urges you to see the value in being humble. If action seems called for, he asks you to consider non-action. If you feel that grasping will help you acquire what you need or want, he counsels you to let go and be patient. And just what is this thing called the Tao, spelled T-A-O? As we're told in the first verse, to name it is to lose it. So here's the best that I can come up with. The Tao is the supreme reality, an all-pervasive source of everything. The Tao never begins or ends, does nothing, and yet animates everything in the world of form and boundaries, which is called the world of the 10,000 things by Lao Tzu. Commentaries on the Tao Te Ching generally interpret Tao, T-A-O, as the way, T-E, as the shape and power, that is, how the Tao manifests, and Ching as book. Every translation I read referred to the Tao as the way with a capital W, and T-E, as adding light or color to the way. Well, as I look at the name I've carried with me for over 66 years, Wayne Dyer, I realize what may have attracted me to studying and writing these essays. As you can see, the first three letters of my name make up the word way, while a Dyer, D-Y-E-R, is one who adds light or color. It's no wonder why I've been so totally involved in reading, writing, interpreting, and most significantly, putting into practice these 81 verses in my own life. In The Wisdom of China and India, Dr. Lin Yutang states, quote, "If there is one book in the whole of Oriental literature which should be read above all others, it is, in my opinion, Lao Tzu's book of Tao. It is one of the profoundest books in the world's philosophy," unquote. As you read Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, you're going to find your way through Lao Tzu's mystical and practical philosophy, along with the joy of applying it to your life in today's modern world. Writing this book was a complete surrender to ideas that didn't always seem to fit a linear, rational approach. And it has changed me in a way that's like the Tao itself, unexplainable and unnameable. Once I knew that I'd be spending a year on this project, its creation came about in the following way, which I have journaled here for you. I awake before 4 a.m., I meditate, consume juices and supplements, and enter my sacred writing space. On a table, I have found some framed drawings of Lao Tzu. In one, he's clad in simple robes. In another, he's standing with a staff. And in a third, he's astride an ox. I ease into my work and read one verse of the Tao Te Ching, letting the words stay with me and inviting the forces of both the outer and the inner life to inform me. Some of the passages contain ideas that seem to be directed to political leaders, yet in all cases I keep the average reader in mind. In other words, I seek the wisdom for everyone, not just for those in positions of government or business. I jot down a few notes, and for the next 3 days I think about what Lao Tzu is offering. I invite the Tao to be with me throughout the day in all my activities as a background to the title of this book. Change your thoughts, Wayne, I tell myself, and watch how your life changes. And my thoughts do change. I feel the Tao with me, always there, always doing nothing, and always leaving absolutely nothing undone. As I'm now seeing, with a capital S, the landscape looks different. The people I see are godly creations who are ignoring their own nature, or even more poignantly, needily interfering in the affairs of others. I have a different perspective now. I feel more peaceful and patient. I keep being reminded of the cyclical nature of the world of the 10,000 things, and have powerful insights that change what I see. I know that we humans are like the rest of the natural world, and that sadness, fear, frustration, or any troubling feeling, they can't last. Nature doesn't create a storm that never ends. Within misfortune, good fortune hides. Following my days of thinking and then applying the wisdom of a particular verse, I look into the eyes of Lao Tzu's picture in the early morning, and I wonder, what did you mean? How does this apply here today to anyone who might want to live according to these majestic teachings? What happens next is just mind-blowing. It's that simple. Through the ages, through the atmosphere, through my purple pen and onto the page flows what I can only call automatic writing. I know I don't own it. I know I can't touch it, feel it, see it, or even name it. But the words arrive in the world of the 10,000 things. I'm grateful, bewildered, astonished, and overjoyed. The next day, I begin another 4-day adventure with this wisdom a Chinese master recorded 2,500 years ago, feeling so blessed, honored, and completely awestruck by the profound impact these words have on me. It's my vision that in this 21st century, our world must recruit future leaders who are steeped in the importance of Lao Tzu's work. Our survival may depend on understanding that the concepts of enemy and war can cease to exist through living Tao-centered lives. Government will need to retreat from regulating our personal lives, overly taxing our incomes, and invading our privacy. Yet the lessons and the truths of the Tao must be discovered and applied by individuals. In this way, it can bring you to the enormous wonder of your own being. Yes, you are the Tao at work. Your being came from and will return to non-being. So for maximum enjoyment and benefit, make listening to this book a personal journey. First, listen to one of the passages of the Tao Te Ching and the essay that follows it. Next, spend some time applying it, changing the way you've been conditioned to think, and letting yourself open up to a new way of conceptualizing these ideas. Finally, individualize the verse by writing, recording, drawing, or expressing yourself in whatever way you're called to, and move on to the next verse with a rhythm that suits your nature. The following is from 365 Tao, Daily Meditations by Den Ming Dao, which I love to turn to each day. Listen to this expert and see the Tao coming alive in you. Quote, if you spend a long period of time in study and self-cultivation, you will enter Tao. By doing so, you also enter a world of extraordinary perceptions. You experience unimaginable things, receive thoughts and learning as if from nowhere, perceive things that could be classified as prescient. Yet if you try to communicate what you experience, there is no one to understand you, no one will believe you. The more you walk this road, the farther you are from the ordinary ways of society. You may see the truth, but you will find that people would rather listen to politicians or performers and charlatans. If you are known as a follower of Tao, people may seek you out, but they're seldom the ones who will truly understand Tao. They are people who would exploit Tao as a crutch. To speak to them of the wonders you have seen is often to engage in a futile bout of miscommunication. That is why it is said that those who know do not speak. Why not simply stay quiet? Enjoy Tao as you will. Let others think you're dumb. Inside yourself, you will know the joy of Tao's mysteries. If you meet someone who can profit by your experience, you should share. But if you are merely a wanderer in a crowd of strangers, it is wisdom to be silent. End of quote. Perhaps the overriding message of the Tao Te Ching is to learn how to luxuriate in the simplicity of what you're being told throughout this ancient sacred text. As you put its ideas into practice, you'll discover how profound it all is. But then you'll find yourself startled by its simplicity and its naturalness. The advice of this ancient master is so easy to apply that you mustn't try to complicate it. Simply allow yourself to stay in harmony with your nature, which can be trusted if you just listen and act accordingly. I hope that you'll feel joyously in love with Lao Tzu and his wondrous Tao Te Ching, and that you'll add your light and color to the great way. I offer you my love, along with my commitment to a Tao-centered world. I can think of no greater vision for you, for our planet, or for our universe. Of birds I know that they have wings to fly with, of fish that they have fins to swim with, of wild beasts that they have feet to run with. For feet there are traps, for fins nets, for wings arrows. But who knows how dragons surmount wind and cloud into heaven? This day I have seen Lao Tzu, and he is a dragon. This is from The Way of Life According to Lao Tzu, translated by Witter Bynner back in the 1940s. And that quote you just heard is attributed to Confucius after he visited the elder Lao Tzu to seek advice on points of ceremonial etiquette. First verse of the Tao Te Ching. Quote, the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The Tao is both named and nameless. As nameless, it is the origin of all things. As named, it is the mother of 10,000 things. Ever desireless, one can see the mystery. Ever desiring, one sees only the manifestations. And the mystery itself is the doorway to all understanding. Unquote. Living the mystery. In this opening verse of the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu tells us that the Tao is both named and nameless. This sounds paradoxical to our Western intellect, and it is. Paradoxical thinking is embedded in Eastern concepts such as yin and yang, or the feminine and the masculine, and where things are comfortably described as both this and that. We in the West, by contrast, tend to view opposites as incompatible concepts that contradict each other. Yet this book is asking that we change our ingrained ways of thinking and see how our lives change as a result. The Tao is an unknowable, unseeable realm where everything originates, while at the same time the Tao is invisibly within everything. When we desire to see this invisibleness, this mystery, we attempt to define it in terms of the outer world of form, what Lao Tzu calls the 10,000 things. He counsels us that letting go of trying to see the mystery will actually allow us to see it. Or as I like to think of it, let go and let God. But how can we do that? One way is to permit ourselves to practice more paradoxical thinking by recognizing that desiring, or wanting, and desireless, allowing, are different and the same, rather like the mysterious ends of a continuum. Desiring is the physical expression of creating conditions that allow us to be receptive. That is, it's in the world preparation for receiving. According to Lao Tzu, wanting to know or see the mystery of the Tao will reveal evidence of it in a variety of manifestations, but not the mystery itself. But this isn't a dead end. From this ground of desiring, the flowering of the mysterious Tao grows. It's as if wanting transforms into effortless allowing. Desiring, one sees the manifestations. Desireless, one can see the mystery itself. When we tune into what Lao Tzu is telling us, it becomes readily apparent that our world produces abundant examples of this paradoxical process. Think of gardening and desiring those luscious homegrown tomatoes or spring daffodils. Allowing them to grow is ultimately what happens. Now think of the things in life that involve wanting and how they differ from allowing. Wanting to go to sleep, for instance, rather than going to sleep. Wanting to diet rather than dieting. Wanting to love rather than loving. In this reference to the Tao, desireless means trusting, permitting, and allowing. Desire is both the beginning and the ground of desirelessness. Yet wanting is also the beginning and the ground of allowing. They are the same, and they are different. Pay attention to times when you can feel in your body where you are on the continuum between desiring and allowing, or trying and doing. Trying to play the piano, drive the car, or ride the bicycle is the same as, and different from, actually playing the piano, driving the car, and riding the bicycle. Once these outer world activities are desired and learned, there's a time when allowing is what you do. The point here is to recognize the difference in your body between trying and allowing, and to then become aware of the effortless sensation of the latter. This practice will also lead to a greater awareness of the invisible mystery and the 10,000 things which are the visible phenomenon of our world. The 10,000 things that Lao Tzu refers to represent the categorized, classified, and scientifically named objects of the earth, which help us to communicate and identify what we're talking and thinking about. Yet for all our technological expertise and scientific categorization, we can never truly create a human eye or liver or even a grain of wheat for that matter. Each of these things, along with the remainder that comprise the known or named world, emerge from the mystery, the eternal Tao. Just as the world is not its named parts, we're not exclusively the skin, bone, and rivers of fluids that we're physically made of. We, too, are the eternal Tao, invisibly animating our tongues to speak, our ears to hear, our eyes to see and experience the manifest and the mystery. Consciously allowing this nameless mystery is ultimately the way to practice the Tao. Does this mean putting yourself in harm's way? Of course not. Does that mean trusting the mystery at the moment you're being mugged or mistreated? Probably not. Does it mean never trying to change things? No. It does mean cultivating a practice of being in the mystery and allowing it to flow through you unimpeded. It means permitting the paradox of being in form at the same time that you allow the mystery to unfold. Do the Tao. Find your personal way of living in the mystery, as Lao Tzu says in this first verse, and the mystery itself is the doorway to all understanding. Here's my advice for translating this passage into daily practice in this 21st century. First and foremost, enjoy the mystery. Let the world unfold without always attempting to figure it all out. Let relationships just be. For example, since everything is going to stretch out in divine order, don't try so hard to make something work. Simply allow. Don't always toil at trying to understand your mate or your children or your parents or your boss or anyone else, because the Tao is working at all times. When expectations are shattered, practice allowing that to be the way it is. Relax. Let go. Allow. And recognize that some of your desires are about how you think your world should be, rather than how it is at that moment. Become an astute observer. Judge less and listen more. Take time to open your mind to the fascinating mystery and uncertainty that we all experience. And then, practice letting go of always naming and labeling. The labeling process is what most of us were taught in school. We studied hard to be able to define things correctly in order to get what we called high grades. Most educational institutions insisted on identifying everything, leading to a tag that distinguished us graduates with knowledge of specific categories. Yet we know, without anyone telling us, that there's no title or degree or distinguishing label that truly defines us. In the same way that water is not the word water any more than it is agua, Wasser, or H2O. Nothing in this universe is what it's named. In spite of our endless categorizations, each animal, flower, mineral, and human can never truly be described. In the same way, the Tao tells us that the name that can be named is not the eternal name. We must bask in the magnificence of what is seen and sensed, instead of always memorizing and categorizing. Do the Tao now. At some point today, notice an instant of annoyance or irritation you have with another person or situation. Decide to do the Tao, or practice the way, in that moment by turning inward with curiosity about where you are on the continuum between desire and allowing. Permit the paradox of wanting the irritant to vanish and allowing it to be what it is. Look inward for it in your thoughts and allow yourself to feel it wherever it is and however it moves in your body. Turn all of your attention to becoming open-minded, allowing permissiveness to befriend the mystery within yourself. Notice how the feeling manifests itself, perhaps doing loop-de-loops in your stomach, giving a rigidness to your skeleton, making your heart pound, or tightening your throat. Wherever it is, allow it as an enigmatic messenger within you, and give it non-judgmental attention. Notice the desire for the feeling to disappear, and allow it to be monitored compassionately by you. Accept whatever comes. Encounter the mystery within without labeling, explaining, or defending. It's a subtle distinction at first, which you must take personal responsibility for identifying. You alone can prepare the ground of your being for the experience of living the mystery. Second verse of the Tao Te Ching. Quote, "Under heaven all can see beauty as beauty, only because there is ugliness. All can know good as good, only because there is evil. Being and non-being produce each other. The difficult is born in the easy. Long is defined by short, the high by the low. Before and after go along with each other. So the sage lives openly with apparent duality and paradoxical unity. The sage can act without effort and teach without words, nurturing things without possessing them. He works, but not for rewards. He competes, but not for results. When the work is done, it is forgotten. That is why it lasts forever." Unquote. Living the paradoxical unity. The concept of something or someone being beautiful is grounded in a belief system that promotes duality and judgment. This way of thinking is prevalent and commonplace for just about everybody in our culture, perhaps even having some value in society. I encourage you to explore the concept of paradoxical unity in this second verse of the Tao Te Ching. By changing your thoughts, you can change your life and truly live the bliss of oneness. Has it ever occurred to you that beauty depends on something being identified as ugly? Therefore, the idea of beauty produces the idea of ugliness, and vice versa. Just think of how many concepts in this duality belief system depend on opposites. A person isn't tall unless there's a belief system that includes short. Our idea of life couldn't exist without that of death. Day is the opposite of night. Male is the antithesis of female. What if you instead perceived all as a piece or a glimpse of the perfection of oneness? I think this is what Lao Tzu is suggesting with his description of the sage who lives openly with apparent duality and paradoxical unity. Imagine the perfect oneness coexisting in the apparent duality, where opposites are simply judgments made by human minds in the world of the 10,000 things. Surely the daffodil doesn't think that the daisy is prettier or uglier than it is, and the eagle and the mouse have no sense of the opposites we call life and death. The trees, flowers, and animals know not of ugliness or beauty. They simply are, in harmony with the eternal Tao, devoid of all judgment. As the sage lives openly with apparent duality, he synthesizes the origin with the manifestation without forming an opinion about it. Living without judgment and in perfect oneness is what Lao Tzu invites his readers to do. He invites our wisdom to combine perceived opposites and live a unified life. The perfection of the Tao is allowing apparent duality while seeing the unity that is reality. Life and death are identical. Virtue and sin are judgments needing both to identify either. These are the paradoxes of a unified life. This is living within the eternal Tao. Once the dichotomies or pairs of opposites are transcended, or at least seen for what they are, they flow in and out of life like the tides. Practice being a living, breathing paradox every moment of your life. The body has physical boundaries. It begins and ends and has material substance. Yet it also contains something that defies boundaries, has no substance, and is infinite and formless. You are both the Tao and the 10,000 things simultaneously. Let the contrasting and opposite ideas be within you at the same time. Allow yourself to hold those opposite thoughts without them canceling each other out. Believe strongly in your free will and ability to influence your surroundings, and simultaneously surrender to the energy within you. Know that good and evil are two aspects of a union. In other words, accept the duality of the material world while still remaining in constant contact with the oneness of the eternal Tao. The debilitating necessity to be right and make others wrong will soon diminish. I believe that Lao Tzu would apply the Tao Te Ching to today's world by suggesting the following. First, live a unified life. Enter the world of oneness with an awareness of the propensity to compartmentalize everything as good or bad, right or wrong, beautiful or ugly, are standards of the physical world, not the Tao. Contemplate the insight that duality is a mind game. In other words, people look the way they look, period. Criticism is not always necessary or helpful. See the unfolding of the Tao inside everyone, including yourself, and be at peace with what you observe. Be a good animal and move freely, unencumbered with thoughts about where you should be and how you should be acting. For instance, imagine yourself as an otter, just living your otterness. You're not good or bad, beautiful or ugly, a hard worker or a slacker. You're simply an otter, moving through the water or on the land freely, peacefully, playing and without judgment. When it's time to leave your body, you do so, reclaiming your place in the pure mystery of oneness. This is what Lao Tzu means when he says, when the work is done, it is forgotten. That is why it lasts forever. In other words, you don't have to leave your body to experience forever. It's possible to know your eternal self even in the embodied condition. When duality and judgment crop up, allow them to be a part of the perfect unity. When other people create dichotomies, you can always know oneness by practicing the Tao. Also, accomplish much by trying less. Effort is one piece of the whole. Another piece is non-effort. Fuse these dichotomies, and the result is effortless action without attachment to outcome. This is precisely how you dance with someone. You make an attempt, assume a position, listen to the music, and let go all at the same time, allowing yourself to easily move with your partner. Combine the so-called opposites into the oneness of being without judgment or fear. Labeling action as a fine effort implies a belief that trying hard is better than not trying. But trying itself only exists because of beliefs about not trying. Attempting to pick up a piece of trash is really just not picking up the trash. Once you've picked it up, then trying and not trying are irrelevant. Understand that you can act without the implied judgment of words such as effort and trying. You can compete without being forced to focus on outcome. Eliminating opposites paradoxically unifies them so that it is unnecessary to identify with one position. I imagine that in today's language, Lao Tzu would sum up this second verse of the Tao Te Ching in these two simple words: just be. Do the Tao now. Do the Tao today by noticing an opportunity to defend or explain yourself and choosing not to. Instead, turn within and sense the texture of misunderstanding, feeling it all the way through your physical system. Just be with what is, instead of opting to ease it by traversing this outer world path of explaining and defending. Don't get caught up in the apparent duality of being right or wrong. Congratulate yourself for making a choice to be in paradoxical unity, a oneness where all of the spectrum simply is. Silently appreciate the opportunity, along with your willingness to practice your sageness. Third verse of the Tao Te Ching. Quote, putting a value on status will create contentiousness. If you overvalue possessions, people begin to steal. By not displaying what is desirable, you will cause the people's hearts to remain undisturbed. The sage governs by emptying minds and hearts, by weakening ambitions and strengthening bones. Practice not doing. When action is pure and selfless, everything settles into its own perfect place. Unquote. Living contentment. This third verse of the Tao Te Ching advises rearranging priorities to ensure contentment. Focusing on obtaining more objects of desire encourages external factors to have control over us. Pursuit of status, be it monetary or a position of power, blinds us to our relationship to the eternal Tao, along with the contented life that is also available. Overvaluing possessions and accomplishments stems from our ego's fixation on getting more wealth, more belongings, more status, more power, or the like. The Tao recommends refraining from this kind of discontented way of life, which leads to thievery, contentiousness, and confusion. Rather than seeking more, the Tao practice of gratitude is what leads us to the contented life. We must replace personal desires with the Tao-centered question, how may I serve? By simply changing these kinds of thoughts, we will begin to see major changes taking place in our lives. The advice to practice not doing and trusting that all will settle into a perfect place may sound like a prescription for laziness in a failed society, yet I don't think that's what Lao Tzu is offering here. He isn't saying to be slothful or inactive. Rather, he's suggesting that trusting in the Tao is the way to be directed by the source of your creation and to be guided by a higher principle than your ego-driven desires. Ego-fixated wants can get in the way of divine essence, so practice getting ego out of the way and be guided by the Tao in all that you do. In a state of frenzy, trust in the Tao. Listen for what urges you onward, free from ego domination, and you'll paradoxically be more productive. Allow what's within to come forward by suspending worldly determination. In this way, it will no longer be just you who is conducting this orchestration that you call your life. Much of this third verse contains advice on how to govern. I view this not as political or administrative advice, but as it pertains to our own personal lives and those we're entrusted to guide, that is, our immediate families, and in a larger sense, the human family that comprises all of those with whom we're in contact on a daily basis. Encourage your relatives to empty their minds of thoughts about status and acquisitions, and think instead about serving others and contributing to the health and strength of all. Model the harmony of this attitude. After all, everyone has a calling to be inspired. The source of creation is not interested in material possessions or status. It will provide what is needed. It will guide, motivate, and influence you and everyone else. Ego, and its incessant inventory of desires, probably needs to be weakened so that the beauty of the Tao can be sensed. Demonstrate this to others by being a leader who removes the egocentric temptations that foster envy and anger and competition. If Lao Tzu were able to view our contemporary world from his 2,500-year-old perspective, I believe that he'd offer the following advice based upon this third verse of the Tao Te Ching. First, remind yourself daily that there's no way to happiness. Rather, happiness is the way. You may have a long list of goals that you believe will provide you with contentment when they're achieved, yet if you examine your state of happiness in this moment, you'll notice that the fulfillment of some previous ambitions didn't create an enduring sense of joy. Desires can produce anxiety, stress, and competitiveness, and you need to recognize those that do. Bring happiness to every encounter in life instead of expecting external events to produce joy. By staying in harmony on the path of the Tao, all the contentment you could ever dream of will begin to flow into your life. The right people, the means to finance where you're headed, and the necessary factors will all come together. Stop pushing yourself, Lao Tzu would say, and feel gratitude and awe for what it is. Your life is controlled by something far bigger and far more significant than the petty details of your lofty aspirations. And secondly, trust the perfection of the eternal Tao, for it is the ultimate source of all of the 10,000 things. The Tao is working for and with you, so you needn't remind it of what you crave or what you think it has forgotten on your behalf. Trust the harmony of the Tao. It took care of everything that you needed in your creation, as well as your first 9 months of life without any assistance from you and totally independent of any desires you may have had. The Tao will continue to do so if you just trust it and practice not doing so much. Inventory your desires, and then turn them over to the unnameable. Yes, turn them over and do nothing but trust. At the same time, listen and watch for guidance, and then connect yourself to the perfect energy that sends whatever is necessary into your life. You, meaning your ego, don't need to do anything. Instead, allow the eternal perfection of the Tao to work through you. This is Lao Tzu's message for our world right now. Henry David Thoreau made the following observation in the middle of the 19th century as he wrote at Walden Pond, and I feel that it personifies this third verse of the Tao Te Ching. Quote, "Let us spend one day as deliberately as nature, and not be thrown off the track by every nutshell and mosquito's wing that falls on the rails. If the engine whistles, let it whistle till it is hoarse for its pains. If the bell rings, why should we run? I've always been regretting that I was not as wise as the day I was born." End of quote. Trust in your essential sageness. Don't let desires obscure your eternal connection to the Tao. Do the Tao now. Watch for an opportunity today to notice that you're planning on buying something. Choose to do the Tao and listen for guidance. Be grateful that you have the choice to make the purchase. Then practice listening to yourself and not doing. Through your feelings, the Tao will reveal the way for you in that moment. Trust it. You might be guided to buy the item and savor it with gratitude, or donate it, or procure one for you and one for someone else, or even to give the money to a charity instead of getting the item, or refrain from obtaining it altogether. Practice doing the Tao in everyday situations, and you'll know contentment in a deeper sense. As this verse says, when action is pure and selfless, everything settles into its own perfect place. Now that's my definition. Fourth verse of the Tao Te Ching. Quote, "The Tao is empty but inexhaustible, bottomless, the ancestor of it all. Within it, the sharp edges become smooth, the twisted knots loosen, the sun is softened by a cloud, the dust settles into place. It is hidden but always present. I do not know who gave birth to it. It seems to be the common ancestor of all, the father of things." End quote. Living infinitely. The Tao is the source of all life, yet it is empty and limitless and cannot be constrained, quantified, or measured. This life-giving energy of creation provides a profound source of joy that's accessible at all times. If you live from an infinite perspective, You'll relinquish the idea that your own identity is the physical body in which you progress from birth to death. In your totality, you're an infinite being disguised as a person existing in the world of sharp edges and twisted knots, as this verse refers to. Coalescing within and around you at all times is the invisible, life-giving force of the Tao. It is inexhaustible. It is bottomless. It cannot be depleted. This fourth verse of the Tao invites you to consider rearranging your thoughts about who you are. It seems to be saying that cultivating an awareness of the infinite aspect of yourself is the way to tap into the limitless source of creative energy that flows through you. For example, you may want to help some less fortunate people improve their day-to-day existence, but you don't believe that you have the time or the energy to do so because of who you are and what you're presently doing. As you relax your hold on the idea of yourself as the job you do or the life you're living, and seek to acquaint yourself with the limitless creative energy that's a part of you, the time and energy you require will appear. Imagine yourself helping others, guided by the infinite aspect of yourself, will generate behavior and actions that complement your vision through the common ancestor of the Tao. Ultimately, you'll cultivate an absolute knowing that whatever assistance you need is right here and right now, in front of, in back of, above, and below you. It is empty, yet very much present. It is, as Lao Tzu reminds you, inexhaustible, bottomless, the ancestor of it all. Awareness of the omnipresence of the Tao means that thoughts of shortages or lacks aren't prevalent. Beliefs such as, "There's no way this will happen, it's not my destiny," or "with my luck, things could never work out," cease to be entertained. Instead, you begin to expect that what you imagine for yourself is not only on its way, it's already here. This new self-portrait based on the cooperative presence of the invisible Tao elevates you to living an inspired life, that is, one of being in spirit, or in unending touch with the Tao. When you live infinitely, the rewards are a sense of peaceful joy, because you know that all is in order. This is what I imagine Lao Tzu's ancient words mean in our modern era. First, consider all things that seem to be a problem from the perspective of the eternal Tao. Believing that there's a shortage of prosperity is a signal to think in terms of the inexhaustible source, the Tao. Just like everything else on our planet, money is available in limitless quantities. Know this and connect to the bottomless supply. Do it first in your thoughts by affirming, "Everything I need now is here." Prosperity thoughts are energetic instructions to access your infinite self, so actions will follow them. Take this same approach, staying in harmony with the Tao, to all of your problems, for there's an all-encompassing supply of well-being to partner with. So rather than giving energy to illness and perceived misfortunes, stay with the Tao. Stay with what can never be used up. Stay with that which is the Father of all things, the creative source of it all. It will work with and for you, as you have it in your thoughts, then in your feelings, and finally, in your actions. And secondly, be an infinite observer. When acknowledged as a sign of change, worry is transitory. It's simply part of the world of the changing. If you view your life from the vantage point of an infinite observer, concerns, anxieties, and struggles blend into the eternal mix. From this ageless perspective, picture how important the things you feel depressed about now will be in 100, 1,000, 1,000,000, or an uncountable number of years. Remember that you, like the infinite Tao from which you originated, are part of an eternal reality. Rearrange your thoughts to practice thinking in alignment with the Tao. With the assistance of the eternal Tao, all of the sharp edges of life smooth out, the knots loosen, and the dust settles. Try it. Do the Tao now. Pick a situation today. Any situation will work, and instead of verbally responding, be silent and listen to your thoughts. For example, in a social gathering or business meeting, choose to seek the emptiness found in silence in order to be aware of your infinite self. Invite it to let you know when or whether to respond. If you find your worldly ego interpreting or judging, then just observe that without criticizing or changing it, you'll begin to find more and more situations where it feels peaceful and joyful to be without response, just to be in the infinity that's hidden but always present. You might want to duplicate this advice of my teacher, Nisargadatta Maharaj, and post it conspicuously so that you can read it daily as I do. Quote, "Wisdom is knowing I am nothing. Love is knowing I am everything. And in between the two, my life moves." Unquote. And while you're living, stay as close to love as you can. Fifth verse of the Tao Te Ching. Quote, "Heaven and earth are impartial. They see the 10,000 things as straw dogs. The sage is not sentimental. He treats all his people as straw dogs. The sage is like heaven and earth. To him none are especially dear, nor is there anyone he disfavors. He gives and gives without condition, offering his treasures to everyone. Between heaven and earth is a space like a bellows, empty and inexhaustible. The more it is used, the more it produces. Hold on to the center. Man was made to sit quietly and find the truth within." Unquote. Living impartially. The Tao does not discriminate, period. Like heaven and earth, it is impartial. The Tao is the source of all, the great invisible provider. It doesn't show preference by giving energy to some while depriving others. Rather, the basic life-sustaining components of air, sunshine, atmosphere, and rain are provided for all on our planet. By choosing to harmonize our inner and outer consciousness with this powerful feature of the Tao, we can realize the true self that we are. The true self is our unsentimental sage aspect that lives harmoniously with the Tao. This aspect doesn't view life in one form as more deserving than another, and it refuses to play favorites, or as Lao Tzu states, he treats all his people as straw dogs. Lao Tzu uses this term to describe how the Tao, as well as the enlightened ones, treats the 10,000 things that comprise the world of the manifest. In Stephen Mitchell's translation of the Tao Te Ching, he explains that straw dogs were ritual objects venerated before the ceremony but afterward abandoned and trampled underfoot. In other words, Taoism reveres and respects existence impartially, as an ebb and flow that is to be revered and then released. With impartial awareness, the sage genuinely sees the sacredness within all the straw dogs in this ceremony we call life. This fifth verse encourages us to be aware of this unbiased source and, as a bonus, to enjoy the paradoxical nature of the Tao. The more rapport we have with the energy of the Tao and the more we're living from its all-creating perspective, the more it's available to us. It's impossible to use it up. If we consume more, we simply receive more. But if we attempt to hoard it, we'll experience shortages ourselves, along with the failures of having even a wisp of understanding. The Tao and its inexhaustible powers paradoxically disappear when we attempt to exclude anyone from its unprejudiced nature. The varied forms of life are illusory, as far as the Tao is concerned, so no one is special or better than anyone else. This sentiment is echoed in the Christian scriptures, quote, "God sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous." Matthew 5:45, unquote. Practicing impartiality is a way to incorporate this fifth verse of the Tao Te Ching into your life and to practice its wisdom in today's world. To that end, this is what I believe Lao Tzu was trying to impart to us from his 2,500-year-old vantage point. First, stay in harmony with the impartial essence of the Tao in all of your thoughts and all of your behaviors. When you have a thought that excludes others, you've elected to see yourself as special and therefore deserving of exceptional favor from your source of being. The moment you've promoted yourself to this category, you've elevated your self-importance above those whom you've decided are less deserving. Thinking this way will cause you to lose the all-encompassing power of the Tao. Organizations, including religious groups, that designate some members as favored aren't centered in the Tao. No matter how much they attempt to convince themselves and others of their spiritual connection, the act of exclusion and partiality eliminates their functioning from their true self. In other words, if a thought or behavior divides us, it's not of God. If it unites us, it is of God. Stay centered on this Tao that resides within you, Lao Tzu advises, and you'll never have a thought that isn't in harmony with spirit. And secondly, offer your treasures to everyone. This is what the Tao is doing at every moment, offering to all the entire spectrum of creation. Think of this as a simple three-step process. 1. Eliminate as many judgments of others in your thoughts as possible. The simplest, most natural way to accomplish this is to see yourself in everyone. Remember that you and those you judge share one thing in common, the Tao. So rather than viewing appearances, which are really nothing more than straw dogs, see the unfolding of the Tao in those you encounter, and your criticisms and labels will dissolve. And 2, remove the word special from your vocabulary when you refer to yourself or others. If anyone is special, then we all are. And if we're all exceptional, then we don't need a word like that to define us, since it clearly implies that some are more favored than others. And 3, finally, implement the 3rd step of this process by extending generosity through living the Tao impartially and connecting with the inner space of being the Tao. In this space, you'll be able to be unbiased about your possessions, recognizing that they're not exclusively yours, but are rather a part of the entirety. By unconditionally sharing and giving, you'll thrill at the experience of living the Tao and being unprejudiced. The Tao is your truth. It resides within you. Quietly be in the peace and joy of connecting with the inexhaustible Tao. Do the Tao now. As many times as possible today, decide to approach interactions or situations involving other people with a completely fair mindset, which you allow and trust to guide your responses. Do this as often as you can for an entire day with individuals, groups, friends, family members, or strangers. Create a short sentence that you silently repeat to continuously remind yourself that you're approaching this situation with an unbiased attitude, such as, "Guide me right now, Tao. Holy Spirit, guide me now," or "Holy Spirit, help us now." Keeping this brief sentence on a loop in your mind will prevent judgment from habitually surfacing. But even more appealing is the feeling of relaxation and openness to whatever wants to happen in those moments of impartiality. 6th verse of the Tao Te Ching. Quote, "The spirit that never dies is called the mysterious feminine. Although she becomes the whole universe, her immaculate purity is never lost. Although she assumes countless forms, her true identity remains intact. The gateway to the mysterious female is called the root of creation. Listen to her voice. Hear it echo through creation. Without fail, she reveals her presence. Without fail, she brings us to our own perfection. Although it is invisible, it endures. It will never end." Unquote. Living creatively. In this 6th verse, Lao Tzu refers to an eternal and indescribable force of creation that continuously gives birth to new life. He tells us that this mysterious female energy continually reveals itself in perfection, and he invites us to an awareness of that voice of creation echoing throughout life in a myriad of ways. Living creatively is how I describe existing with a conscious awareness of the presence of this feminine principle. This mysterious female is always birthing, and the Tao Te Ching speaks of the gateway to her as the root of creation. It's telling us that we have the ability to tap into this unlimited field and co-create, or as I've said, live creatively through the Tao. The never-dying formative energy is both our heritage and our destiny, functioning whether we're conscious of it or not. What awareness accomplishes through practicing the Tao is to let us participate in the process, which in turn leads us toward the wholeness that is our ultimate earthbound task. Although his writings are almost 3,000 years old, Lao Tzu is offering 21st century advice here with a message that's as timeless and never-ending as the Tao itself. Words may change, but be assured that the feminine energy can and will bring you to your own perfection. If you choose to be aware of the inherent creativity that resonates deep within you, where the invisible Tao sings the loudest, you'll assist the birthing of new ideas, new accomplishments, new projects, and new ways of understanding your life. In Deng Ming Dao's 365 Tao daily meditations, the divine feminine energy is equated with the sound of birds soaring and gliding over a vast landscape. Quote, "You can feel this in your life. Events will take on a perfect momentum, a glorious cadence. You can feel it in your body. The energy will rise up in you in a thrilling crescendo, setting your very nerves aglow. You can feel it in your spirit. You will enter a state of such perfect grace that you will resound over the landscape of reality like an ephemeral bird song. When Tao comes to you in this way, ride it for all that you are worth. Don't interfere. Don't stop. Don't try to direct it. Let it flow and follow it as long as the song lasts. Follow. Just follow. End quote. Here are some thoughts for living creatively. First, know that you are a divine creation birthed not by your parents, but by the great spiritual divine mother, the Tao. When you're in touch with the energy of your origin, you offer the world your authentic intelligence and talents and behaviors. You're co-creating with the you that originated in the Tao and the very measure of your essence. The Tao is not confused about what to create and how to go about it, as this is your legacy from the mysterious feminine. Listen to your inner callings. Ignore how others might want to direct your life energies, and allow yourself to radiate outward what you feel so profoundly and deeply within yourself. There is a reservoir of talent, ability, and intelligence inside of you that's as endless and inexhaustible as the Tao itself. It must be that way because you are what you came from, and where you came from is this all-encompassing, endlessly creative Divine Mother, the mysterious feminine of the Tao. Whatever you feel within you as your calling, whatever makes you feel alive, know in your heart that this excitement is all the evidence you need to have your inner passion become reality. This is precisely how creation works, and it's that energy that harmonizes with the Tao. And secondly, be creative in your thoughts, in your feelings, and in all of your actions. Apply your own uniqueness to everything you undertake. Whatever you feel compelled to do, be it write music, design software, do floral arrangements, clean teeth, or drive a taxi, do it with your unique flair. Being creative means trusting your inner callings, ignoring criticism or judgment, and releasing resistance to your natural talents. Re-listen to this 6th verse, paying particular attention to these words. Without fail, she reveals her presence. Without fail, she brings us to our own perfection. Then choose to let go of the doubt and fear you've harbored within you regarding your capacity to harmonize with the creative power, a power that's not only greater than your individual life, but is life itself. As the great 14th century Sufi poet Hafiz reminds all of us, quote, just sit there right now. Don't do a thing. Just rest. For your separation from God, from love, is the hardest work in this world. Unquote. When you reconnect to your Divine Mother, you'll be living creatively. You will, in fact, be living the Tao. Do the Tao now. Today, notice babies and small children. Look for the mysterious feminine nature in little boys and girls who haven't yet become so attuned to cultural and societal demands that their true selves are hidden. Can you see some whose inherent nature is intact? Notice what seems to be their natural character or their gift from the Tao. Then try to recall yourself as a child, when the natural, Tao-given self was unaware of the ego self, the time before you believed that acquisitions or power were important. Who were you? Who are you now? Yes, today, spend a few moments with a young child and contemplate his or her connection to the Tao and how it unfolds perfectly, without any interference. 7th verse of the Tao Te Ching. Quote, Heaven is eternal, the earth endures. Why do heaven and earth last forever? They do not live for themselves only. This is the secret of their durability. For this reason, the sage puts himself last, and so ends up ahead. He stays a witness to life, so he endures. Serve the needs of others, and all your own needs will be fulfilled. Through selfless action, fulfillment is attained. Unquote. Living beyond ego. The opening line of this 7th verse of the Tao Te Ching is a reminder that the Tao, the source of heaven and earth, is eternal. By extension, the original nature of life is everlasting and enduring. There is a quality that supports this durability, and that quality responds when we live from our Tao center, rather than from our worldly ego center. Identifying exclusively with the physicality of life, and basing our existence on acquiring and achieving things, disregards our infinite nature and limits our awareness of Taoness. In such a finite system, it therefore seems logical to strive for possessions and accomplishments. Being civilized in most cultures primarily constitutes being consumed with attaining success in the acquisition of power and things, which supposedly will provide happiness and prevent unhappiness. The primary idea is of a self who's a separate being in a separate body, with a name and with cultural and biological data that are similar in values and patriotism to others. The Tao, particularly in this 7th verse, is suggesting that we update those notions and choose to exist for more than ourselves or our tribe, that is, to radically change our thoughts in order to change our lives. Lao Tzu says the secret of the ineffable nature of the eternal Tao is that it isn't identified with our possessions or in asking anything of its endless creations. The Tao is a giving machine that never runs out of gifts to offer, yet it asks nothing in return. Because of this natural tendency to live for others, the Tao teaches that it can never die. Giving and immortality, then, go hand in hand. The sage who grasps this everlasting nature of the Tao has gone beyond false identification with the ego and instead has a living connection to the Tao. This person puts others first, asks nothing in return, and wholeheartedly serves. In this way, the sage lives the ultimate paradox of the Tao. By giving without asking, he attracts everything that he's capable of handling or needing. By putting himself last, the sage ends up ahead. By putting others before himself, he endures, just like the Tao. The sage emulates the natural philanthropy of the Tao, and all of his needs are fulfilled in the process. The ego is a demanding force that's never satisfied. It constantly requires that we seek more money, more power, more acquisitions, more glory, more prestige, to provide the fuel that it thinks it must have. But living a Tao-centered life rather than an ego-centered one removes us from the rat race, as it offers inner peace and satisfying fulfillment. This is what I believe the wisdom of this verse of the Tao Te Ching is saying for the 21st century. First, make an attempt to reverse ego's hold on you by practicing the Tao's teaching to serve the needs of others, and all your own needs will be fulfilled. Generously thinking of and serving others will lead to matching your behaviors with the perpetual rhythm of the Tao. Then its power will flow freely, leading to a fulfilling life. Ego wants the opposite, however, as it tells you to think of yourself first and get yours before someone else beats you to it. The main problem with listening to ego is that you're always caught in the trap of striving and never arriving. Thus you can never feel complete. As you reach out in thoughts and behaviors, you activate loving energy, which is synonymous with giving. Put others ahead of you in as many ways as possible by affirming, I see the sacred, invisible source of all in its eternal state of giving and asking nothing in return. I vow to be this too in my thoughts and in my behavior.